I think it was inevitable that he was going to have to resign because I think the allegations against him for not moving far enough and fast enough were serious and far-reaching. I think at a practical level, he seemed to have lost the confidence of clergy. So there was a large petition calling for his resignation. There were people going on the media calling for his resignation. There were members of Affinity, like the Church Society, who were publicly calling for his resignation. So I think the momentum was so strong that it had to happen, and it was an appropriate thing to happen. I think it's always difficult in the kind of the frenzied sort of nature of media stories to be entirely proportionate. But I think at a simple level, you are correct that from the stories that we've all been hearing the last 2 or 3 days, he didn't move far enough or fast enough. There wasn't a due recognition of the scale of the abuse and the seriousness of the abuse that he, as he rightly says in his letter, had to take institutional and personal responsibility for. And I think that just became so clear over the last few days that his position did become untenable. So I think it is almost as simple as you say. And sometimes, as you would know in the media, these stories gain momentum. So what seems fairly contained on day one becomes much more significant. So I think it was the fact that the story was growing. I think people take time to read a big report like the one that came out at the end of last week. So church leaders and bishops and so forth will take time to reflect on it, and they'll read reports of reports, and they'll see what other people are saying about the reports and start to put together a timeline. And I think that gained momentum and perhaps clarity during yesterday, which meant the calls intensified for him to resign. So I think that's what changed from last week to this week. I think, to be fair, of a number of judgments, perhaps I think he made the wrong judgment last week to kind of do down the suggestion that he should resign. I wonder if he was being advised poorly at that particular point, because it kind of seems obvious to everybody now. Those who seem closer to the details would suggest to me that there are some others who are spoken about in the report who also may need to consider their position. So I think it is more than that. Obviously, he takes that overall leadership responsibility. That's appropriate. But I think that there may be others who also need to reflect on what their culpability is in it. But I think it's much more than that. It's to do with cultural change. How can the Church of England recover its cultural roots, which are not to do with being kind of institutionally powerful, but actually to do with understanding and believing the Bible, following Jesus, living like Jesus lived, preaching the message of the gospel, telling people that Jesus is risen from the dead, and doing that in a way that's loving and cares for the flock, which means there are robust safeguarding processes in place where there are not people who lord it over other people. That's what our mission is as church, and we need to recover that. I think it damages the whole church, so I'm sad about it, even though personally I'm not in an Anglican church. Some of my members are members of Affinity, but of course it damages the reputation of the church, because the Church of England is public facing. It's the church that people kind of recognise. If they don't know church at all, they'll at least think, well, Church of England, when they think church. So it damages that, and we don't want people to think the church is full of abusers, because it's not. We want people to think the church is full of the good news of Jesus Christ. So it damages that main message, and that's the message we want to get back to, but not by ignoring the victims and survivors, by caring for those well, but also by having a culture change where we focus on the main thing, which is telling people about Jesus. I clearly think that it's someone who believes the Bible, who preaches the Bible, who teaches the Bible, and that's what the Church of England should be about. So we don't need a politician, we don't need an administrator. We need someone who will go back to the roots of the Church of England in terms of their confessions of faith, in terms of their attachment to the Bible, in terms of all those brilliant Reformation things that happened. And that's what we want. We don't want a woke church, but we also don't want a church that's kind of conservative with a small c, and that just always is traditional. We want a church that's just Bible-based and connects with culture.